Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos. I'm glad you stuck around because we're the part of the show where we have our guests. And as I like to remind you guys, we do have the very best guests here at the AUN TV network and on Conservative Commandos that you can find anywhere on TV and radio. And I've got Jon Decker here to prove it. He's the president of the Viante Foundation. And he is also, you may remember him as the former executive director of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. And we are really glad to have you back, Jon. It is great to be discussing things that matter with you. And I wanted to ask you is, what's on your radar screen right now? What are some of the important issues that are at least poised maybe to make some progress for us?
Thank you very much, George. I greatly appreciate you having me on. It's always a pleasure to be on your show and get to talk to your listeners. One of the issues that's on my radar right now, by a bit of background, my organization, Viante, was founded in 2017 to promote better schools, safer neighborhoods, and more economic prosperity in the state of New Mexico. And this year we had sort of some exciting news. Our chairman, Dale Armstrong, has decided to sort of branch out from that initial mission and do so by creating our new Viante Foundation, which is going to allow us to work on a lot of those same issues that we were active on before, but with a more national focus. We will be active in the fight for better schools, safer neighborhoods, more economic growth on both the state and federal level. And we like to tell people wherever we can make a difference, that's where we're going to be. And so one of those places where Viante is going to be present right now is in the state of Texas, because Texas has some pretty big news coming down the pipeline. In October, Governor Greg Abbott has called a special session to address the issue of school choice in the state of Texas. He's actually calling this special session explicitly for that purpose. And it's really exciting to see because Governor Abbott's really taken a strong leadership stance on this issue and made clear that this is the expectation of the legislature. As Governor Abbott has said himself, he said, if it fails in this special session, I'm calling another one. So he's putting maximum pressure right now on the Republicans and Democrats in the legislature to get this thing through, which is great to see because in some of the states where school choices had trouble or even failed recently, I've talked to a lot of people in the legislatures there. And one of the things that I know made a difference was they felt that the governor had not quite put his thumb on the scale enough. They felt that maybe there needed to be more of a push from the top down, and that's really what helps get these sort of big grand initiatives accomplished through the state legislature. Governor Abbott is thankfully taking that strong principled stance, and he really needs all the help he can get. He needs our help and our encouragement on that legislature. And I don't think I need to tell your listeners, obviously the state getting school choice in the state of Texas is especially meaningful. Just because of the size of Texas, the amount of students in that population. And it's a state that has a disproportionate impact or disproportionate influence in the American education system because it's such a powerhouse in terms of population. And even sort of the curriculum that gets decided in textbooks is in Texas, is curriculum that gets sort of passed around nationwide because obviously Texas can buy a lot of books for its schools. So Texas has a big role, and it's great to see that this state, we have a real opportunity to make meaningful education reform that's going to change a lot of students' lives. If you're just looking for a reason to be optimistic about America's future, I think that you should really look no further than the school choice issue, because in just this past year alone, just in 2023, we've actually already had 10 states pass some form of school choice legislation. And that's incredible and obviously a real indictment of the teachers' unions and the way that they handled the COVID crisis. I believe that more than any one thing has sort of created the impetus, created this magic moment where we can make lasting reforms to America's education system. And here being able to do it in Texas, really doesn't get much bigger than that. So all eyes at the Viante Foundation are on this Texas special session to make sure that we're doing our part. To give encouragement to the legislators that need it, and also to put the heat on the ones that are still skeptical or even opposed. One of the problems that we have in Texas right now, particularly with a lot of Republicans in the rural districts, there's not a lot of people that live there, and they have sort of a collective illusion that their primaries in the future are going to be dictated by the teachers' unions, that these off-year elections, teachers' unions in their rural districts will have outsized control, and they're afraid that they're going to come after them. So we got to make sure that we show them, no, the grass is greener on the other side. Good politics or good policy is good politics. and that this is something that we got to do, and your constituents are going to thank you for it once you do.
It's a very, very good point. One of the things I think is interesting about educational choice is it answers a lot of the problems that we see in education with one fell swoop, meaning that, for example, there's lots of discussion about what should we be teaching in the schools. Well, school choice answers that question, because eventually what you really do is you just tell parents, you decide. You pick the school that you want to send your kids to. And so parents get to decide. And it's one of the things I find very interesting is a lot of times you'll hear people on the left say, oh yeah, but I don't like this reform because I feel like that's the wrong focus. I don't like this reform. And it's like, okay, well, here, the reform for school choice is basically saying that parents get to decide what their kids' education will look like. Who could possibly care more than the parents? And who's more motivated for the parent than the parents to get them a good education? And they could differ. An example could be, you could have a parent who is a left-wing radical, for example. They probably still care about their kids, you'd hope, right? And so they could have a say in how their kids' education will go. So I would argue that educational choice is not really an issue that only speaks to conservatives or even mainstream Americans. What it really says is, no matter who you are, if you'd like to have more say in what your children are taught, then you should be for school choice. Because instead of government taking money from you and then just telling you this is how we're going to spend it, and this is the school you're stuck with, whether you like it or not, you can then go out and figure out what school you want. And that seems to me like a really winning message, whether you're, you could be, somebody who thinks Joe Biden's a great president, or you could be somebody who doesn't. And you could still think, yeah, but I'd like to be in charge of my kids' education. You know what I mean? That's one thing I find odd, is that school choice often is an issue that is more favored by mainstream or conservative Americans than it is by the left. And yet I don't quite understand why, because it's not designed to facilitate a particular curriculum. It's really just designed to empower and improve education through things like competition, through the concept of find a school that meets your kids' needs. Maybe there's a school that, like, maybe you have a kid who's got, somewhere on the autism spectrum. Then you might look for it's not just curriculum you're looking for. You may be looking for a school that focuses on how to teach kids who have that learning disability or problem. If you've got a kid who's having a difficult time reading because maybe they're dyslexic, again, you may have lots of things you're looking at, and it's not just curriculum. It might be how the school's focus. But the point is, it makes the education about your kid, very individualized. That becomes important, and I can't imagine why that is only appealing to conservatives. It troubles me that that's only appealing to conservatives.
Yeah, that's a great point, George. And I think it's fun for me to just even imagine what America's going to look like as a country decades from now, as this school choice movement continues to blossom. What's America going to look like when our workforce is overflowing with people who received an education that was completely tailored to their individual needs or talents? And I think that school choice, for that reason, it's going to better prepare people for the jobs of the future. And like you said, too, if the child has some sort of special needs in the education setting, school choice gives them more educational opportunities. It gives parents more control. Parents now have the ability to fire schools that just aren't getting the job done for their kids. And I don't know what parent would not want that control. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. Why would you not want maximum control over the path that the education path that your child takes? I think that everyone is in agreement that it's great that parents and students can pick out their own college and university. I think that everyone understands that that's a good thing. We don't want to take away that choice in whether or not you go to a college or a university, and what college or university you go to if you choose that path. So why not apply that same choice to K through 12 education too? And I do believe that you're going to see better education outcomes for students when you allow the field to open up more and go after and apply for different schools or education opportunities that are best tailored to their individual talents and needs. Also, a better way to prepare people for the jobs of the future. Schools will have more flexibility to be creative in terms of sort of the lesson plans that they offer, what they teach. We know that the jobs of the future are going to change. We're seeing an AI revolution taking place right now. It's going to make certain forms of work that were once very popular more obsolete. It's also going to open up great opportunities for other brand new, cool, and exciting work. And so I think that with this sort of technological revolution taking place, and of course the need to compete against China too, one way to do that is through the education system, opening up choices for parents and students as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. One of the things I think that's interesting about school choice, though, is let's assume that as a parent, you're overwhelmed, you don't know what to do, and so you just say, "I'm going to keep my kid in public school, the one that's in my neighborhood." School choice benefits you too, even if that's your choice. Now, school choice doesn't mean you have to go elsewhere. What it means is now the public school that in the past you were held captive, now all of a sudden you can. They're going to try to improve quality. Imagine, for example, if where you went to buy your groceries didn't need to win your business. Instead, the government just deducted money from your paycheck to cover your grocery bill. And then you'd show up at the store and they'd hand you a cart full of food that they'd selected for you. Do you think that's going to be quite as good as if you got to pick where you went and what you purchased? Is it going to meet your family's needs as well? And I think the answer is clearly here that just the act of there being competition will improve them. And the example I would give is in the United States and throughout the world, most people would argue the United States university system is the most robust and the best. People come from all over the world to attend our universities because it's perceived as the best. That is not true on the K through 12. We do not have the best. We're somewhere, kind of in middling. And why? Because we have competition at the university level and we don't at the K through 12 level. And what's interesting is whether you're going to a state-owned school for college or a private school, you can still get a great education. Why? Because the state school has to compete. And so I would argue that if we want to see a revolution in our education and have it become the gold standard throughout the world, the way our university system is, let's do what we did. Let's unleash the idea of school choice. I feel like choice and competition really drive excellence. I have a feeling you see it the same way.
Absolutely. And I also think, too, that to your earlier point, one of the big myths about school choice is that it will harm the public school system. I think that is one of the biggest myths of all. And I do see school choice actually enhancing the public school system for pretty simple reasons. First is I just imagine that public schools, they're always going to receive a disproportionate amount of funding just by nature of the fact that it's a government program. It's not going to totally go away. I don't see that happening with our school system, regardless of whether that should be the case or not. There's always going to be a place for public schools in our system. That's just the nature of government. But with that said, the money, the education dollars follow the child. And so, if less children are going to a public school system, going to another school, yes, in that one sense, there's less dollars going into that public school. But there's also one less student that they need to care for too. And I think that by virtue of school choice, it's actually going to open up the public school systems to have smaller class sizes. And that's something that's going to benefit students across the board. I think that it's generally accepted consensus that smaller class sizes are something good for students. They get more time one-on-one with the teacher. And I think that is actually something that is going to benefit student learning in the public school setting. So in that sense, that's going to strengthen the public school system, and I imagine that they'll still be getting ample amount of funding to carry out their programs. But yes, they are going to be subject to more competition, and they are going to have to raise the bar for student performance to keep people in the building.
Yeah, and that's all win, 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 win. It's not just win-win. It's like a gazillion wins in there. That's, it's very good public policy. John, this is probably a good spot for us to take a quick break. I'm glad you can stick around because I know there's more to discuss on some other issues, but I want our viewers and listeners to know, don't go away because John Decker with the Viante Foundation and, of course, Conservative Commandos will be right back. We've got lots more to discuss. We're just going to take care of a little business, so we'll see you on the flip side.
You're still looking good.
I'm still feeling good. You know, I've got all your MyPillow products. Mattress topper, bed sheets, MyPillows, towels, slippers, blankets, sleepwear, dog beds.
Whoa, Charles. Everyone now can get MyPillow products at huge discounts at MyPillow.com. That's right. Now's the time to go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of our 3-in-1 sale. We're bringing you exciting new products, overstock specials, and closeout deals you won't find anywhere else. For example, when you buy one of our brand new MyPillow 2.0s, you get another one absolutely free. And with our overstock sale, you save 50% on our luxurious Giza Dream bed sheets. That's as low as $29.99 for the best sheets ever. And with our biggest closeout special, you get our all-season slippers for only $35. Or our sandals and slides for just $25. Quantities are limited, and once they're gone, they're gone.
To order, please call 800-797-7893 and use the promotion code AUNTV, that's 800-797-7893, and AUNTV, again, that's 800-797-7893, and AUNTV.
Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos. I'm glad you guys stuck around because we've been having a great conversation with John Decker, who is the president of the Viante Foundation. And we started off talking about school choice. And I guess the one thing, John, I was going to say on that school choice idea, and then I know we want to move on to some other things that are on your radar screen. But I do think it's very interesting that school choice, if we allow it to happen, promises it's a reform that benefits everybody. It basically says you don't have to be the wealthy guy, because right now our system is if you're wealthy, you can afford to send your kid to the school you want to. And so what could be more kind of egalitarian, as it were, than telling every American, we don't care if you're a Kennedy or if you're a Clinton or if you're Obama, you don't have to be rich, you don't have to be a Biden. You can go to the school you want to go to, and we're going to facilitate that. So I think it has a lot of appeal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right now we have a system where your education outcome is pretty much determined by your zip code. In terms of where you're going to school, what kind of education you're going to get there. And it's just not fair that we trap students in failing school systems. And we have to acknowledge that some of our public school systems are failing. And it doesn't mean that every single one of them are. I'm a product of the public school system myself. I went to Ridge High School in New Jersey, and I believe I got a good education there. But I need to understand, and your viewers need to know that that's not everywhere, even if they feel they got a good education from the public schools. There are serious problems in our public school system. There are quote unquote dropout factories where, half of the students don't graduate on time, and the education opportunities from that school are very limited, as well as the test score performance is very low as well. So we want to give students an option outside of really the same education opportunities that even the wealthier students have to go to another school, to have that kind of choice over their own curriculum and have unique learning opportunities provided for them. So I think, again, going back to Texas, it's a great opportunity to really move the needle forward on this issue. Governor Abbott has taken a strong stand. I hope that he will continue to do so. And we need to do our part to raise our voices to say that this is important, and that our children's future is just too important to see this fail, to see this special session fail. This is the moment for school choice. The iron is hot. People are upset with the teachers' unions from COVID, and this is our opportunity to make a big education reform that's going to make a meaningful impact on the future direction of our country.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. I know you've got a lot on your radar screen, but I wanted to ask you what are some of the other issues that you're monitoring and concerned with and working on, because heaven knows we've got a lot of troubles right now as a nation, and we've got to overcome them. I know economically, we are now in basically 2 years of stagflation and 2 years of inflation. Of course, stagflation is a stagnant economy mixed with inflation. How do we fix some of these things, and what are some policies we could do to break this cycle?
Yeah, I think that we absolutely do need to keep talking about inflation, because it is a serious, persistent threat to our economy, and it's not going away. The Biden administration is now obviously trying to take certain victory laps and say, oh, inflation is coming down, but our core PCE core consumer price index is still showing above 3% inflation annually, certainly above the Fed's target of 2%, and even that target is too high for inflation to begin with. So we're still in an environment where inflation is persistently high. It's not as high as it maybe once was a few months back, but still persistently high, and it's not showing any real sign of coming down. And the Federal Reserve is already starting to back off some of its monetary tightening that it's doing. So there's no real reason to believe that it's going back down to zero anytime soon. We can see what sort of consequences this stagflation environment has had in our economy. Home ownership is still very unattainable for a lot of young Americans. We're still paying high prices at the grocery store and at the gas pump. Savings accounts have really diminished while household debt has skyrocketed. These are all problems that are caused by this stagflation environment. And of course, more families are working multiple jobs in order to make ends meet. So these are products of our high inflation environment, and we need to try to figure out what we need to do to get out of it. And I think that some of the ideas that I personally am promoting, one is this idea that we should index capital gains to inflation. Currently, if you have money that's invested in the stock market or it's invested into real estate right now, when you go to sell that asset over the course of its lifetime, you pay taxes essentially on the inflation that incurs over the period with which you held that asset. To give you an example, if I had a $100 investment in the year 2010, and I wanted to sell that investment today, if I were to sell that investment, that asset would need to be worth $137 just for me to break even on it. It would need to be worth $137 when you factor in the inflation gains. So now you can see how inflation really wreaks havoc on investments, how it really wreaks havoc on savings too, because that investment needs to be worth so much more essentially just for it to be worth the same. So $137 would essentially be a break even on a $100 investment in 2010 right now. So let's say that this asset, say it could be a stock, was worth $125. And let's say I wanted to go sell that stock. I would actually be taxed, according to the tax code, I would be taxed as though I gained $25 in that stock. So the asset's worth $125. I would be taxed for a $25 gain. I would get that tax bill when in fact the value of my asset had lost $12 when you factor in inflation. So essentially I'm getting a tax bill on top of inflation, which is in and of itself a tax. Clearly this is not a good system, and we have income adjustments for inflation, but not on the capital gain side. And so it's prudent that we extend it to that. And because we've had such high inflation recently, that really creates an impetus for doing this, because this will unlock a lot of capital in our economy that's otherwise frozen into place right now due to our high inflation environment. And one thing that Reagan understood very well as Jack Kemp when they had the initial supply side revolution, was they didn't just cut taxes, they had to stabilize the value of the dollar. And one of the reasons they wanted to stabilize the value of the dollar was they understood that there was this bracket creep that was occurring that was from inflation, which showed up in our tax code. There was more inflation, so people were getting pushed into higher tax brackets, and they were getting pushed into higher income tax brackets, even though on net they weren't actually making more wealth. We have this problem right now because of this high inflation environment, particularly with our capital gains taxes, and that capital gains tax rate, as we know, is so important. We saw that even under Bill Clinton, he cut the capital gains tax rate, and that was probably the best thing he did for the economy in his entire presidency in terms of launching investment. And so indexing capital gains for inflation, it amounts to that sort of a tax cut on investment. And that's something that I expect we would see huge dividends in terms of economic growth all across our economy.
Yeah, well, as I say, capital gains, at least in the broadly speaking, the economy, maybe for the average American, the capital gains might be things like home ownership. But in the economy, it's what builds factories. It's what builds things, buys equipment. These are things that drive economic growth. In other words, you don't want to discourage it. You don't want to tell people, because like right now, things are 16% more expensive than they were a year and a half ago. And so if they just break even, you don't want to tell them, oh yeah, by the way, we're going to tax you like you made a killing. And they're like, well, I didn't make a killing. I'm just breaking even. And then, And then all you do is discourage investment. And discouraging investment is the same thing as discouraging economic growth, greater gains in productivity and things like that. And so it just seems to me like really counterproductive policy to unleash inflation rather than unleashing prosperity. And given your track record of working on the issues of prosperity, I know you are on that one, but one of the things I find amusing, and I'll ask you to see if my analogy here is fair. We've had incredible inflation through most of Joe Biden's presidency. It almost very quickly after he became president and all of his policies were put into place, it didn't take long, with just a couple of months, inflation went through the ceiling. And so I would argue it's like this. You've got a friend who's putting on 9 to 10 pounds a month, gaining weight month after month, ballooning up. And at some point you're looking at him saying, dude, you're going to die of a heart attack if you keep this up. This is not healthy. You're going to have to stop gaining this weight, and you need to lose some of this weight. And so then your friend says, hey, no worries. I'm only putting on 6 or 7 pounds a month. And you're like, actually, that's not going to fix the problem. And then later he does a little better, and I'm only putting on about 4 pounds a month now. You're kind of like, you're still on a path to oblivion. Stop this craziness. And so that's kind of how I see Joe Biden when he tells us he's fixed inflation. What he really means is he's not gaining as much weight as he was a year or two ago this month, but he's still gaining weight. And is that fair?
That's absolutely correct. And yeah, I mean, we should not be cheering for 3% inflation in our economy. Even if it was at the Fed's quote unquote target of 2%, I would argue that we still shouldn't be cheering for that either. 3%.
When Biden became president, it was less than 2%. It was 1.4%, which is essentially, pretty negligible. That's very, very close to practically being zero.
Mm-hmm. And this has now forced a lot of businesses to come up with major wage increases too. And now businesses, which they did, and now businesses are starting to feel the pinch too in terms of their profit margins. And so it's causing a lot of ripple effects all throughout our economy that are certainly very troublesome. Certainly the monetary policy of the last few years also led to the string of bank failures as well too. And now those banks should have been much more cautious when looking at their spreadsheets in terms of the maturity of their long-term bonds and things like that, and what their yields were. But this is something that's now really created a massive ripple effect throughout our economy. Inflation, I think, is the biggest challenge that we face to this day. And so, no, cheering for 3% inflation, I think, is definitely unhelpful. And I think that the Biden administration should be backing away from that. What I think that the Biden administration and Republicans in Congress should be doing is dusting off a piece of legislation called the Centennial Monetary Commission, which was something that I believe back in 2012 first came into sort of prominence. And it was actually in the Republican Party's platform at the time for what they wanted in a presidential candidate, their sort of party platform for that race. And basically the Centennial Monetary Commission provides a neutral forum to make a formal recommendation to the Federal Reserve on what sort of rules-based monetary policy they should follow. Republicans have different ideas on what we should do to sort of fight or tame inflation. Some people want something called nominal GDP targeting. Some people, including myself, are more inclined to support the classical gold standard, interest rate targeting, or a Paul Volcker rule. And I don't need to bore your listeners with every single one of these ideas that Republicans have come up with. But the point is, there was once legislation crafted by Representative Kevin Brady that would provide a forum to basically solicit testimony and make a formal recommendation on a straightforward path for the Federal Reserve to follow to stabilize the dollar, to ensure that we have stable prices and that we are trying to facilitate the best economic growth possible through our monetary policy, rather than just consistently devaluing the dollar. And that legislation hasn't been picked up in quite some time, but I think it's time to dust it off. And Republicans who are looking for a simple way to kind of do something about inflation, or at least get that focus back in the halls of Congress, that's one piece of legislation that I would dust off and look towards.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, we've really got to figure out, because I get a kick out of the idea that, oh, inflation it's because of Russia and Ukraine, it's Putin's fault. And it's like, actually, if you look at inflation, it peaked at its highest levels long before anything was going on, and it's just kind of, it's nutty stuff. It's kind of like, that's interesting. So how did the markets predict that in a year's time, the Russia problem was going to exist? And so they preemptively started raising prices. It's like, come on, this is stupid. Because cause effect, interestingly enough, implies a sequence of events. That's why it's not effect cause. It's cause effect because the cause happens first and then the effect. And so it can't be that inflation starts, then a year later, Putin invades Ukraine. But so that's kind of where we're at, this kind of nutty stuff. But anyhow, I wanted to ask, how can we follow the work that you're doing, John? Because the Viante Foundation is obviously involved in some pretty important stuff. And I'd like for our viewers and listeners to kind of begin to see it as a place to go to find out things that they can be involved in, that they can support, and that they can see as a source for information.
Thank you very much, George. Well, I would like to encourage your listeners to go to Viante New Mexico or VianteNM.org. You can Google Viante New Mexico or VianteNM.org. There you'll find our 501c4 page and our Viante Foundation website, which will reflect our new national program. That'll be going live in the next couple weeks. I can tell you that the web domain will be VianteFoundation.org, but as I'm new to the job right now, we're still wrapping that one up before we're kind of going to push it out publicly. But we'll have that to look forward to soon. If you go to VianteNM.org, you can go to our 501c4, our old website. You can sign up there, and you'll be on our mailing list for all the good stuff that's to come. Again, our organization exists to promote better schools, safer neighborhoods, and economic growth. And we're going to take that fight wherever we feel that we can make a difference, wherever we feel that we can make an impact. We have an excellent team, and really hope that your readers will join us. We'll be planning some really fun events, and together let's create an echo chamber for this Texas school choice fight, because here we have an opportunity to really make a difference.
Absolutely. That's great messaging, and I think just an important cause. Really good stuff. Really appreciate your time, John. I just enjoyed the conversation tremendously, and I'm on board 100%.
Thank you, George. I greatly appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Very good. Well, folks, don't go away, because the Conservative Commandos will be coming right back. We're going to take care of a little business, but there's still more to discuss out there. There's more to be done, and we hope you will stay through, because we're going to have more good guests and more things to discuss. So we'll see you on the flip side, folks.